everybody. Welcome back to Bridging the Gap. My name is Colin McEvers.
My name is David James, and our guest today is the president of the county council, John Cannon.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Thank you for coming and sharing this time with us.
Sure.
Definitely. So our first question that we have for you, Mr. Cannon, is how long have, and you touched on this a little bit before the camera started recording, how long have you been on the county council for Wicomico?
I've been on since 2006, November 2000 or December of 2006. I did take about a 4-year hiatus in between that, from 10 to 14, but then I got back on and I've been on ever since.
Alrighty.
So yeah.
Wow. So during that time, you've been on there just as council, or?
Well, I've been on. I think when you add it all up, it comes into about. I think about 9 years. I've been president of the council, and a few years vice president of the council. Yes, spent one. Yeah, that's pretty much the crux of it.
Wow. So what's the difference between just being council and being the president of the council?
Well, as president of the council, you do have to be completely aware of every single issue that's coming across the table. A lot of times after a meeting, I'm not always sure exactly what happened during that meeting, because you also have to run the meeting at the same time. So there's a lot to that. And the council president sets the agenda prior to the meetings.
Sure.
So I have to know what I think are the highest priorities for the county as well as for the council to address.
Wow. So at the same time, you also are an at-large seat right now, right?
Sure, yeah.
So you've been at large the whole time as a councilman?
Yeah, I always did that, Dave. I could have run for my district at the time, which was District 3.
Right.
But for some reason, I felt, if I'm going to do it, let me get in completely engaged. So I immediately ran at large from day one. When I first ran, the county only had the 7 council members. So when I was in for my very first year as council president, Rick Pollitt was the very first county executive. So we were the first 2 to experience that from day one.
So, wow.
Okay, and speaking of districts, actually, there's a redistricting that's been brought about by the NAACP.
NAACP, yep.
Sure.
NAACP.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? Professionally, personally, about the redistricting and what's going to be happening with that?
Sure. I had an issue with that, both in philosophy and in the process, both of those. Philosophically, I didn't really feel as if the at-large positions were a hindrance to any type of equity. I actually felt that the at-large positions were a benefit, because if you're a representative of any one of the 5 districts, and you don't really have a good relationship with your representative, or your representative just isn't doing the job, right? And that could be in any one of the districts. At least you have the option to go to the at-large council members to express your concerns with them. So I thought it was always an advantage. It gave any district, including a minority district, the right to have options in case they weren't satisfied with their district.
Speaking of minority district, what qualifies a district to be a minority district?
I guess, well, they look at the numbers as far as what the race might be in that particular district. So I don't know how they specifically do it, Dave. I don't know if they just say, well, this is a white district and this is a non-white district.
Right.
I don't know who or what numbers go into play as far as considering that a minority district, but that would be my guess. But I'm sorry, I didn't finish my thought. My bad there. Sure. But I talked about the philosophy, which I fully disagreed with. But the process was something I really was upset with. I felt that it was a real rush to judgment. I did not like whatsoever the way they disparaged Wicomico County as a whole, and really portrayed Wicomico County as a white supremacist county. I grew up in Wicomico County. I was born here. And I've seen how things have developed, et cetera. And there's problems throughout the country, and you can sort of make claims in the history of just about any county. But I feel that Wicomico County has really come a long way in their processes.
Sure.
And what troubled me more than anything was the fact that they actually said these very disparaging things in reference to the citizens that live here. But what really bothered me more was that they claimed that there was resistance to allowing any fairness in the electoral process for minorities. What really killed me, Dave, was that just within the last series of 4 or 5 years, we went through a complete redistricting after the census, the 2020 census. We went through total redistricting. For almost a year, we had a committee that met to talk about how are we going to redistrict.
Sure.
Not one member of this group came to those meetings at all and had any concerns whatsoever as to whether or not the minority district or the at-large positions were racial inequity. Never. There were two individuals on the committee that broached the subject.
Sure.
And ironically, they were white. They were not. They weren't. They weren't non-white. However you phrase it. But this group never came there. Not only that, but then we had outside the redistricting, we had charter review committees where they could have come to the charter review committee and said, "We want it put on the ballot." I'm talking about several different election cycles where they could have come and said, "We want this put on the ballot. We want to change this for more, to demonstrate more equity within the county." Never came to any of the charter review committees to discuss it. Best part, 2 days before they stood on the steps of the government office building with their press releases that they were going to sue Wycomico County for racial discrimination. 2 days before that, we had a county council meeting. Not one of those individuals came to the county council meeting and said, "Hey, we have a problem with with how this is how these districts are being laid out." So that's the problem. They never came to the council. They never came to the redistricting committee. They never came to the charter review committee. But they stood on the steps and filed a claim against us, which could have cost us $400,000. But luckily, Shaney Shields and we went to Baltimore to an arbiter to settle it for about $125,000. And now, after the fact, they said, "Well, that's a small price to pay for social equity." Of course, my answer to that was, 50 cents is a lot cheaper. You could have sent us a letter with a postage stamp and made a request, and you probably would have achieved the same goal.
Wow. Yeah, race grifters are a real problem nationwide, and I guess this is a local example of it. People that try to use racism and discrimination and things like that, even if it's not prevalent, to make a name for themselves, make money, things like that.
Right.
It seems like this case had a lot of that in it.
Yeah, and I'm not blind to the fact that there's social inequity. I get that, but to file a complaint to the degree that they did, and to put the entire county and the 107,000 citizens of Wycomico County into that type of a position when all that was needed was a phone call, a conversation, or just a letter, and that was the disappointing part of all that.
There's one word here that's kind of getting under my skin. It's the word equity. I like the word equality. And I mean, personally, just being I guess they would say a person of color,
right.
I want to actually be able to, if I was to run for a council seat or as an executive or something, I want to be able to be elected based upon the fact that I could get the job done.
Exactly.
It's kind of like in school, John. When I was in school, if I'm racing against Colin, don't give me a head start because my color of skin.
Right.
So I mean, again, thank you for informing us on that, and I can see how that could be kind of questionable. Now, as far as the districting, how it is now, why was it never 7 districts before instead of 2 at large?
I don't know, David. It's before my time. They'd always just had 5.
They always
2.
had it.
Yeah, I guess for the same reason where they had felt that at least that there were 2 that could represent everyone in case they felt alienated from their particular representative.
Sure,
they'd have an option somewhere else to go.
So, and I remember a few minutes ago you were saying as council president, you really have to do a lot. You have to be I mean, you know what's going on. You have to set up the agenda, and as being at large, I've made this comment whenever I chopping it up. Like even with this city, their council leadership is the council president.
Right.
Do you feel that, like, okay, if we think of on the federal level, you have the House Speaker. Would it be better known as House Speaker or President? Because if you have an executive form of government, does that, like, do you see what I'm saying? Because you have to be everywhere as council president, right? But then does the executive have to be everywhere? So does that put both of you kind of like, you see what I'm saying? Everywhere.
It's just a matter of collaboration. I mean, the executive does their job, I do my job. council members do their job. I'm not so sure that Jeff Merritt doesn't go to more things than I do now.
He does go to a lot.
He does. He's very responsible. He takes it very seriously.
Wow.
I think he's continuously on the phone, and all the council members, are very good at doing their part.
Yeah.
I just know and experience more what Jeff's doing because he's the vice president. There's a lot of times I have to ask a question or need him to step in for me, and he does it immediately. So.
Wow.
A lot of work.
Okay. So,
It's more than 2 days a month, though.
yeah.
More than 2 days a month.
I mean, you're on a lot of different boards too. I actually was talking to you a few minutes ago before we went on air. Did a bio on you and see that you're kind of everywhere.
Right.
I mean, how many boards are you currently on?
I think I'm on 5 with the SWED, the airport, the library, not the Farm Bureau, but anyway, about 5 of them I'm on there.
And you were once Tri-County chairman?
I was once chairman of the Tri-County Council, yeah. You're doing your homework. So.
Wow, busy man. Has that, I don't know, how's that made you where you are right now, being involved that much in community?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's nothing but rewarding. Everybody knows about the headaches because you read those in the headlines.
Easy, yeah.
But from what I get to do, believe me, it has its share of very hard work where you're up until midnight making sure you know everything. When I go to a council meeting and I have people sitting in front of us, I have to make sure that they're going to be asked the right questions and that their time is not going to be wasted when they're sitting in front of the council.
Wow.
And that's a very primary responsibility. So you have to know all the detail inside and out. And it's a lot of stuff sometimes, such a scattered different series of subject matter that you have to prepare for. But it's rewarding. It is very rewarding. I like it. The branching out into the community and having the opportunity to get to know and to meet people such as yourselves, and that's very rewarding for me to be able to do that. Wouldn't have any other reason to really talk to you guys if I weren't in this position I am right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
How did you acclimate to that when you first became a councilman, like your first term?
That's a really great question. Let me tell you how it's surprising because the very first year I got on, the very first meeting I had to go to, I'm president of the council. It was the Salisbury JCs. It's a leadership training organization back then, and there were a lot of us there. And that's what actually changed my course and actually got me in, made me decide I wanted to do more than just what I was doing. I wanted to be, have a broader impact upon the community. But not only that, but they taught you the ins and outs of how to run a meeting, what you needed to know. And I was president of the Salisbury JCs, so we did this every day or every meeting. We were already doing this. I had a friend of mine say, "You've only been on like 2 weeks. How do you know what?" And that was it. Really, it was surprising that led to that type of support, that type of education before I actually got on the council.
Definitely, I'm sure for a lot of people when they first join something or elected to a position, it takes a little bit of a while to kind of become fully experienced or fully effective in that position. How long do you think it took for you? You said something along the lines of 2 weeks, but how long do you think it took for you to become like an effective council president, a leader that effectively organize things in the business of the county?
That's for other people to tell you, to answer that question for you, to let them tell you how long it took me to catch on. I think I took to it rather quickly. I really do. And again, it comes back to the fact of the training that I had with the Salisbury JCs, because you dealt with a lot of people. We had about 100 membership, and you had to run a meeting there and keep everybody in order. And they used to always challenge you with Robert's rules to know, when any type of measures could be taken to the table. But I just enjoyed it from day one, and I felt it's just like I just felt normal in that role.
I see.
And there's things that you can get caught up with. Sometimes I found the biggest thing you have to be careful about is not making a commitment too soon, because there's times when I've made a commitment to a particular person or a particular cause, and then another set of circumstances come, and you go, oh, I don't think I can honor that. And that's tough when you have to possibly go back and say, we have to, kind of like change that a little bit. But it's all, in the long run, it's all worked out, I think, pretty well.
Wow. In your tenure on council, what is the one trait that you think that you have now that would be hard to replace? Would it be?
I tell really good jokes, David. I got great jokes. Nobody knows. But the reality of it, that wasn't a very good joke, was it? But the reality of it is the only thing I can say, and nobody's indispensable, okay? But I just know that I try very hard to be very pragmatic about how I address everything. I try to be extremely diplomatic about it. I always make sure that I take care of any of the constituents. If I get an email or if I get a phone call, I respond to that. I respond to yours.
Yes, you do.
Maybe not in a timely manner, but I try
You
to
do
get back
good.
to you every
You do
time.
pretty good.
But that's really the key, is that you have to make sure that if somebody comes to you and they have a question, all they want is for you to take care of any issues that they might have.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that difficult. All you have to do is try to follow through. So, if anything, I'd just say that I try to be very pragmatic, very diplomatic about how I address things, and maintain the decorum of the job, and at the same time do the hard work that it takes to address the issues and know exactly what you're voting on.
You able to talk across the table with others that are maybe not your party line?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you mean?
Well, I tell you what's very interesting is, and we said this before, we've got 7 council members, and I have walked out of a council meeting so irritated with 1 or 2 council members
I can't
who
believe
took a
that.
different position on something that I really wanted to push.
Mm-hmm.
But they're still great friends of mine, so we all still get along. So you have to have that element. You don't want to be too thin-skinned about it. You have to have the temperament you have to have the temperament to be in politics, period.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. I've only been really, involved in the political sphere, not even as an elected person for the past year or so, and I've seen a lot of things. So I'm sure that it takes a lot. I was actually curious. I know that maybe a couple months ago or something, there's currently an initiative, and I had spoke about this at one of the county council meetings a couple
Right.
weeks ago in regards to the term limit petition that's currently going on. And I believe that it was initially a amendment that was proposed to the council, and I know only like one person voted yes on it. And I know that you and the others, the majority, said that it wouldn't be voted against putting term limits on the ballot in 2026.
Right.
What would you say is your main opposition to the term limits initiative?
Well,
for 2026?
it's similar to a friend of mine, Mark Kilmer, used to say. He was on the council a while back, and he says, well, you already do have term limits. It's the ballot box. That's what it tells you, really. And I get it, because sometimes, and not to disparage anybody, but sometimes you'll watch what's going on in Washington, and they'll be interviewing some representatives there, whether they're in the Senate or whatever, and you're thinking, wow, person's, you kind of think the person's been around quite a while. But I do not believe in term limits whatsoever, because if they're really shouldn't be there, it's the constituents that should make that determination, period. I mean, I have people, I've been around for forever, 19 years. And I was throwing all my signs away 5 years ago. And I had people who talked me into running. And I ran and I won. I'm getting the votes that say, well, maybe there shouldn't be term limits, or the public wouldn't have that option. They wouldn't be able to exercise their democratic, rights to say, I want to see him back in that role. So to arbitrarily say we're going to have term limits, and I know there's term limits on the governor, there's term limits on the president. I'm not sure how all that happened. But if I'm being asked, I would say, no, I don't believe in term limits. I think the public should make that determination. Mike Lewis, do you think that Mike Lewis should only have 2 terms? Do you think Jamie Dykes should only have 2 terms? Right? So who is it to decide whether or not there should be term limitations except for the public and the ballot box?
Certainly, I actually agree on the point of giving people the choice as to whether or not they want to vote for people, and that's one of the things that actually comes up when I tell people about the term limits thing.
When you try to change your mind.
People say that, I think it'd be best. Term limits are, is the vote and such.
Sure.
But in regards to putting it on the ballot and allowing people to make that choice as to whether or not they want to impose limits on their, on their council people, on whoever it might be. This, of course, is particularly related to the Wicomico County Council and County Executive.
Right.
Is that something that would be a negative thing, allowing citizens to make that choice?
Colin, that's a democratic process also. So, have at it. I just gave you my opinion, period.
Sure.
And, to me, you could possibly look at losing some very great people that want to, serve the community. You could lose the institutional knowledge that's really, really very important. I mean, if you live 2 terms, you could easily, without, in no time at all, lose the institutional knowledge. It's really, really important at some time. But, and people want change too, right? So yeah, it's a democratic process. Put it on the ballot and see what the people say.
Now, has this ever been an issue in Wicomico term limits? I mean, was this ever brought to the table before?
I don't think it's ever been really brought up seriously. I don't recall anybody actually going to the extent of having petitions or going out and actually, you know,
Sure,
putting
sure.
petitions out there to be signed.
Sure.
But again, it's part of the process.
Now, within your years in office, what would you say to like Colin here? You're about to turn 21, right?
Yes, that's
Jeez.
couple months from now. Yeah.
Right now,
March.
don't delay.
Yeah. So, what would you say to someone that's maybe his age getting into politics? If you're looking at a younger John Cannon, what would be the top 3 things you would tell him?
Well, first of all, he wants to make sure he's registered as a Republican, Dave. That's
Okay.
important.
Gotcha.
That's one of my jokes, right? But no, I would say just go ahead and do it. I mean, you know, as long as I've been doing it, I wish I had started 8 years sooner, just for how things transition. But do it right away. It's nothing but rewarding. It really is, and it's so challenging. It forces you to be a better person, because you have to make yourself study, you have to make yourself know what the issues are. So when you're going to get out there and you're going to debate in a forum, it's a crash course, and it's a doctorate, and able to get there and talk to all these people that top of mind awareness. They're going to change the subject at any moment, and you have to probably know one of 20 different subjects. You know, whether they ask about airports or roads or education. For the most part, you don't want to fake it. It can get really embarrassing if you try to fake. I did have to say one time that I didn't know the answer to one topic, but it was really easy. And if I could remember off the top of my head, but there was a terminology they used for property that had not, it wasn't brownfields, but it was similar to that. And it was funny because I had written it on a legal pad. And when they asked me that question, I said, you know, I had that on a legal pad at home, but I'm going to have to get back to you on that. But my point being is that you don't want to be embarrassed by that. So I would always say, make sure you do it, but take it seriously. I see so many people who file for office and you never see them again. Really surprised me. That's what surprised me. We were talking about you know, the redistricting and all that. Is I'm the guy who ran. They say that the at-large position isn't fair, but I'm the guy who ran in the at-large for the last, you know, how many years?
Sure.
And I witnessed it,
Yeah.
where people put their name in the arena and they said I'm running, but they did not do the work. And if you're wondering sometimes how some people did get elected and some people didn't, a lot of times when the people did not get elected, it's because they didn't do the work. Some don't even show up for forums. So the thing I'd say is take it seriously. Don't embarrass yourself. You know, take it seriously.
One thing I can definitely tell you, and I'm pretty sure that he wouldn't mind me telling you this. He probably already told you. Councilman Wynn made a really, he had a good compliment for you. He said, nobody knows how to run a meeting quite like John Cannon.
Oh, James said that. Oh, I appreciate that.
So would you say that during your time in office, if you see someone else, like, let's say, okay, on the city level, okay, we got someone like Mr. Doughty in the same position.
Right.
What would be something you would tell him in advice as far as how to do that, how to run a meeting?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, there's so many nuances involved in a meeting specifically. You have to know how to steer it in a particular direction so you don't get off course, because you can get distracted by issues that really aren't relevant to the topic. But it all comes down that if you know pretty much every aspect of the discussion, then it makes it much easier for you to help control the conversation in the room at that time. I think that's probably the key. If you feel like someone is asking a question and another issue comes up that may be more relevant or more pertinent, you try to make sure you can drill home on that particular issue. It's very subtle sometimes, but I think it comes down to just making sure that you're prepared for just about anything, because you never know what's going to happen at the table. You just don't.
Wow.
So,
Colin?
True.
Well, what do you think?
I agree.
So
do you
I do have my final question. I just want to see if you got one before that.
Oh no, I have some, but
Go for it.
ask away.
well, my questions were going to just, I actually, mostly it was just like general things like term limits and other things that I had discussed. So you can ask your question,
Okay.
actually, and I might think of something when you say it.
Well, I just heard you were talking about you were thinking not running at one time. Again, this might be in the past, but I want to ask you now. I've heard speculation that you're not running, but are you running?
Is that your question? Yeah.
That is my question.
See, I have my own degree. I have my own set of term limitations. Okay, and so my decision is that I'm not going to run again. So you have that answer. I don't think it's a big secret. That's my term limitation on myself.
So you just put a term limit on yourself. You're done.
Yeah, 26 is it. Doing a long time. I've enjoyed it, but I really want to get back to more personal stuff. You know. This is every morning. I check my calendar every morning. And I don't check my calendar to see whether I kiss my wife good morning or anything like that, or whether we're going to go out to dinner that night. I check my calendar. She's very, 99% of my life, of course. But I check my calendar because I need to know exactly what county things I have to do each and every day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it's, I'm just saying very specifically that that's part of what it is.
I mean,
You
as
have to
just
look.
councilmen though, or is that period? Like, I mean, we're not no delegate and anything else. You're done with politics after this time.
Yeah, sure. My district is in Chris Adams' district,
Mm-hmm.
and I have a lot of respect for Chris Adams. He gets the job done.
Yeah, Tom Hutchinson is a good guy too. Both
Yeah,
of them
yeah.
do a good job over there.
But Chris is the one really. Tom does a good job as well, but Chris is really the representative as the
Gotcha.
as the Wycomico County resident.
Okay.
That's how they do that. It's an odd thing how they
It
break that
is.
up.
It is.
But Chris is doing a great job. Plus, in all honesty, when that position was open, I was like, I don't think so. It's 5 counties.
Mm-hmm.
5 counties. You might as well run for Congress, right? 5 counties. And I realized that's where I kind of drew the line. I just was fine with Wycomico.
Well, I'm going to say this just to be funny, but at the same time, not even executive. I mean, we do have Michelle Gregory that was against the executive position, but
Right.
now running.
Yeah.
No, not
No.
even that.
No?
Wow.
So I know that a lot of people who aren't necessarily running for things are still going to be involved in the campaign, the electoral process. Come 2026, it's going to be a big year. It's midterms. I foresee a lot of people going out, knocking doors, supporting particular individuals. Do you see yourself being involved in the campaigning process in 2026?
good
at the very
question.
least?
Well, that's a good question. I probably.
He's going fishing.
Probably not. Probably not so. Probably not so. It depends. I mean, if there's a real interest that I have with a particular person that I know I'd really like to help out and see in that position, I would probably do some work with them. I would certainly meet with anybody and sit down for 2 hours if they want to know every complex issue in the county that I can help them with. I wouldn't have any reservations to that. But I think out in the forefront there, as far as working with the debates or door knocking, things like that, probably a back door to that. Yeah.
I see.
Wow.
I see. I'm thinking of a hypothetical. I know that in the past 2024 election, there was the Question A thing that was on the ballot to do away with the executive branch
Certainly.
of government. If someone that you believed was competent that wanted to run for county executive, something along those lines,
Sure.
would you support that individual? Or actually the first question would be, do you still think that the executive form of government should be removed? And then
I'm still not in favor of the executive form of government. I know that back in 2006 when it first put in, I probably voted for it because I thought everybody thought it would be a good idea if you had one person that going to be running the county and then the council as legislative body. But over the years, I've really learned, and I've been through all of them. There's there have been great executives, and there have been executives that are not so great. And I found out, though, from my perspective, is that I think that a county at this level, at a local level, it's much more efficient and effective and representative and transparent and whatever ones you want to have a 7-member council, addressing the issues of the county. Everything has to be done in collaboration. There can't be any personal agendas. If something goes wrong, the council body has to stand there in the public and explain it and deal with it. I think with the executive form of government, you have too many circumstances where things may happen where we're not quite sure what may have caused a problem or something like that. And it's almost human nature, I think, sometimes, that if you can, to sort of circle the wagon. And I feel like that happens a lot with the executive form of government. And nothing gets disclosed. I don't think there's, honestly, true transparency. And that's just the way it is. And of course, anybody can say, well, all you do is just vote them out and vote somebody else in. That's true. You could always do that. But I think it's more consistent with the 7-member council. And people say, well, the 7-member council, they only meet twice, and there's, but that's not really the case. There's a lot of work, and you'll have a county administrator that will work for all 7 members and is responsible for all 7 members. So they can't have any personal privileges, whereas they may decide one thing that's against the will of the actual council. So the county council as a whole, people can't forget, the county council as a whole gave you Shorebird Stadium. They gave you the Civic Center that you have now. They gave you so many of the schools that have been built now, the fire departments, the sheriff's department. They all handled that quite well for many, many, many years. And I've just witnessed it over these last several years that a lot of times I've never seen more speed bumps in the road than I have with the executive form of government, which kind of surprised me. And there was a time at one point in time where we couldn't even go to the bond market and bond. You know, the county came to a standstill because of certain issues that occurred with the executive branch of government that kept us from being able to do that, to go to New York and go to the bond market. And there's many other examples. Well, I think from what you have read, both of you guys read a lot on social media or on the news or in the paper, where you've seen, you know, a lot of controversy. And I just think that I don't think it's necessary to have that type of controversy. And I think when you have 7 members of a county council, as I told you before, yeah, we may not agree with everything, but we do collaborate, and that's really important when you're, you know, when you're doing the public's work.
You'd mentioned some of the accomplishments of the county council. In the past 19 years that you've been on the council, what do you think has been your signature, your biggest accomplishment that you've been directly responsible for?
I think, Colin, it comes down to, and it's an old adage, it's kind of like, will I be leaving it in better condition than it was when I first came in? And I think that's an unequivocal yes. When I look at the success we have with an airport, I mean, we're getting ready to have a new airline down to Orlando right now. We've got a runway extension. We've got a mechanics school. There's so many successes we've had with the airport. I think we've built 5 schools since I've been in. Got the sheriff's department and what we've done in order to you know, give all the men and women of law enforcement the salaries that they feel they need and the benefits that they feel like they need. We've got a new sheriff's building. We've got a new library. We're going to have a library in Parsonsburg now. This one's going to be in the War Museum. There's so many successes you can look back on and say, wow, this has done a really good job. And we've managed to maintain a revenue cap for all these years, with everybody pushing back and say, oh, you have to have a revenue cap. And I say, why do I have to have a revenue cap? We just have $17 million this year, more than we had the year before. So something's going fairly well. And a revenue cap strictly is the purpose, outside of making sure that government spends within its means. When assessments go through the roof, like everybody's witnessed, especially over these last few years, right? We have a revenue cap that forces us to lower the tax rate. That puts more money back in the pocket of the people. When they say, we could have had $20 million more in our coffers over the last 15 years if it weren't for that revenue cap. I say, well, that's $20 million that went back into the pockets of the taxpayers, and that's where it belongs, and we're doing just fine. So that's another part of it, as you said. You know, manage to maintain the conservative, directive that says spend within your means and protect the revenue cap for that purpose. So that's pretty much it. I think when I look back on all the progress that we've made as a county, I think that's really key. I can't take all that credit, but I'm glad to have been like a part of that. So.